There are places on Earth where the wind blows like a reminder of scarcity. In Burkina Faso, in the heart of the Sahel, the sun doesn't just illuminate it, judges. Mornings start with dust and silence. The cracked earth seems to sigh for water. For decades, this small African nation has fought against the impossible growing hope in a soil where nothing wanted to grow. The numbers tell a tough story. More than 80% of the population depends on agriculture, but the harvests are fragile, and the country spends billions of CFA francs importing wheat and basic foodstuffs. In 2023, it was over 193,000 tons of wheat, brought in from abroad, a dependency that cost the country about 42.5 billion CFA francs, which is the equivalent of $75 million. Every sack of flour that arrived through the coastal ports was a reminder of an old wound, the hunger that the people of the Sahel learned to face, but never to accept. Climate change has made the cycle of life even crueler. When the rains come, they arrive with violence, and when they leave behind an expanding desert. The sorghum and millet fields hold on, but they barely suffice to feed the families. And in the cities, the price of bread climbs like the temperature of a fever. The people of Burkina Faso know the bitter taste of dependence. Well, the bread they eat is imported, the grain they plant isn't enough, and the future always seems conditioned by the rain. But amidst the dust, something changed. In recent years, a new movement has begun to sprout, silent and stubborn, like the seeds of the Sahel. A simple, yet revolutionary idea to produce their own food on their own soil with their own hands. And that's how the dream of wheat was born, a crop previously unthinkable in the dry lands of North Africa, and the rebirth of millet, the ancestral grain that fed generations of warriors and peasants. Today, the sun still burns, but it's not the same enemy anymore. It is now the fuel that powers solar pumps, spins mills, and heats the faith of a people who decided to challenge the desert. Burkina Faso, the country of red earth and calloused hands, is writing a new history, the story of a soil that learned to flourish in adversity. For a long time, wheat was seen as a distant luxury, a product of the cold northern lands unattainable for those living under the Sahel sun. But necessity has a strength that no climate prediction can contain. And when hunger pinches, invention is born. That's how Burkina Faso's journey began to turn the impossible into reality, cultivating wheat, right in the African desert. In 2023, the first seeds were cast into the earth with a mix of faith and science. The goal was bold, to double national production by 2026, from 2,597 to 6,000 tons of wheat, covering more than 1,300 hectares of soil that was previously considered infertile. With solar irrigation, adapted planting techniques, and an army of trained small farmers, the harvest began to surprise even the most skeptical folks. For the first time, the golden wheat fields reflected the same brilliance as the sun that used to punish the country. But it's not just about grains. Wheat has become a symbol of a new era, the era of food sovereignty. Each spike represents less dependence on foreign ships, less submission to the international price of bread. The government created incentive programs for production, distributing certified seeds, fertilizers, and agricultural machinery. In the villages, cooperatives were formed, and courses for young agricultural apprentices were set up. Wheat, once foreign, is now a child of the land. The next step was industrial. In Gampela, on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, a modern flour factory was erected with a capacity for 220 tons of flour and 80 tons of bran a day. The inauguration event, witnessed by thousands of people, was marked by applause and tears. It wasn't just the opening of an industry, it was the rebirth of dignity. For the first time, the bread that reached the people's tables had the taste of their own national effort. Today, Burkina Faso's wheat feeds more than just bodies. It feeds pride. Local bakeries display flags in their windows, and farmers talk about the bread of independence. The full silos, aren't just food reserves but monuments to the courage of those who refuse to depend. In every grain there's a story of overcoming. In every batch of bread a piece of freedom that sprouted from the red soil. The desert still exists, but now it knows the smell of fresh bread. And that aroma is spreading, carrying a simple and powerful message: a people who produce their own bread will never again be slaves to hunger. Long before wheat arrived in Africa, the people of the Sahel already knew the grain that sustained empires, tribes, and caravans. They called it millet, the desert cereal. In every village it was more than food. It was heritage. It was culture. It was resistance. When the drought took everything, millet remained. And now, in the heart of Burkina Faso, this ancestral grain is blooming again, not as a memory of the past, but as a hope for the future. Millet is the agricultural soul of the country. It grows where nothing else resists, feeding the body and also the spirit. In ancient times, it was used to prepare zoom-koum, the sweet drink offered to visitors as a sign of hospitality. It's the taste of the land and of African generosity. But in recent years, even this grain almost vanished. The advance of the desert climate change and lack of agricultural policies threatened to turn millet into a relic. That's when science and tradition met. Local researchers, in partnership with the Smart Food Africa project, created a revolutionary hybrid Nafagnon ICMH 14707, the first officially approved hybrid millet in Burkina Faso. More heat-resistant, more productive, more nutritious. Its growth cycle is short, about 80 to 85 days, and it can yield up to 45% more than the traditional varieties. What was once just survival is now productivity. In the fields of Kaya and Dori, the new millet covers the horizon like a golden carpet. The women who have always been the heart of African agriculture are singing again during the harvest. Each handful of grain represents more than food. It represents autonomy, pride, and continuity. The elders say that millet is the living memory of the Sahel, and the young people are starting to see it as an opportunity for the future. Because unlike gold and oil, millet belongs to everyone. The rebirth of this grain also has a spiritual meaning. In a land marked by scarcity, cultivating millet is almost an act of faith. It doesn't ask for much, just a little rain, a little patience, and a lot of love for the land. And it's this balance between humility and strength that makes it the perfect symbol of Burkina Faso's new agriculture, modern, but rooted in tradition. Today, the country that once imported flour is turning to its own past in search of solutions. Wheat is the future, but millet is the soul. And together, these two grains form the heart of what many are now calling the green revolution of the Sahel. A revolution that doesn't come from outside, but sprouts from the red soil, the calloused hands, and the pride of a people who learned to turn the desert into bread. There's an ancient wisdom hidden beneath the dunes of the Sahel, and now it's meeting modern science. For centuries, the farmers of Burkina Faso fought against drought with little more than faith and ingenuity. They created the Zai method, small pits dug by hand where they mix manure, ash, and hope. These simple holes capture every drop of rain, retain moisture, and make the earth breathe again. Today, the whole world is studying Zai, but in Burkina Faso, it has always been more than a technique. It was a form of resistance. In recent years, this local wisdom gained a powerful ally: science. Agricultural engineers, universities, and international organizations like the FAO and the International Atomic Energy Agency (IAEA) are working side by side with farmers, developing varieties of wheat and millet that resist extreme heat and water scarcity. Using techniques of natural genetic mutation and controlled radiation selection, they created plants that bloom where nothing grew before. The lab and the field now speak the same language, the language of survival. In the valleys of the Sahel, small irrigation stations powered by solar energy are popping up. Silent pumps pull water from deep within the earth and spread it over hectares of crops. The sun, which used to scorch the plantations, has now become an ally. With it, wheat grows stronger, millet ripens faster, and farmers regain control over time. Today, the sun gives us life, they say. What was once a punishment is now a source of energy and hope. The results are impressive. In some regions, harvests have increased by up to 500%, thanks to the combination of solar irrigation and new genetic varieties. The soil, once dry and cracked, is starting to regenerate. Earthworms are returning, wildflowers are being reborn. Every seed planted is a promise of rebirth. But what is perhaps most moving is the spirit behind this transformation. There are no foreign machines or distant engineers dictating the future. There are entire communities, men, women, and young people, learning to operate agricultural drones and moisture sensors, while at the same time preserving the ancient planting rituals. Technology has arrived, but without erasing the soul of the land. In Burkina Faso, science and tradition don't clash, they embrace. And it is in this embrace that the country finds its true power, the ability to turn knowledge into bread and despair into dignity. Because here, science is not a luxury, it's survival. And every discovery is a form of prayer, a silent plea for the earth to continue yielding fruit, even under the relentless sun of the Sahel. The sound of the machines mingled with the laughter of the women and the smell of freshly baked bread. It was a different morning in Gampela, and perhaps throughout all of Burkina Faso. There, in the heart of the country, something was rising that seemed more than a factory symbol. On one side, trucks were unloading wheat harvested from the northern fields. On the other, sacks of white flour were coming off the production line with the Made in Burkina Faso stamp. It was the first time the people saw the fruit of their own soil transform into food without depending on distant ports or expensive imports. The new flour factory, modern, clean, almost silent, was built to process 220 tons of flour and 80 tons of bran a day. Dozens of technicians, young engineers, and farmers who traded their hoes for the electronic control of grinders and silos work there. Everything is national, from the wheat grown to the hand that transforms it. The inauguration ceremony was emotional. Men and women from all regions gathered to witness an event that seemed impossible just a few years ago. When the first sacks came off the conveyor belt, there was applause, tears, and even prayers. It was as if the entire country had started breathing again. This factory represents more than economic efficiency. It is the materialization of a collective dream. Every ton of flour means less money sent abroad, more jobs within the country, and above all, more dignity. Wheat is no longer just a plant. It has become the bread of independence. In the markets, bakers proudly say that their product comes from their home soil. In the bakeries, you see the smile of those who for the first time are eating bread born from their own earth. Stories emerge between the concrete walls of this factory. A young technician, previously unemployed, now coordinates the grinding sector. A mother, a farmer, sends her children to school with the money from the harvests. An old baker says, "I waited 40 years for this bread." And every word carries the same feeling: victory. From the field to the oven, the wheat chain has created a new economic cycle. The farmer plants, the state buys, the industry transforms, and the people consume, all within the same territory, without intermediaries. And this perfect circle does something even greater: it restores confidence. Because when a people begins to produce their own food, they also start believing in themselves again. At night, the factory lights remain on. From a distance, they look like stars resting on the red earth. For many, it's just electricity. For others, it's the symbol of a new time, a time when Burkina Faso turns sweat into bread and bread into hope. The machines of Gampela don't just produce flour. They produce a new sense of belonging. The impact of this silent revolution is spreading throughout the country, from the Sahel villages to the avenues of Ouagadougou. Wheat and millet have become more than agricultural products. They have become symbols of a people who learn to walk on their own 2 feet. In less than 2 years, Burkina Faso has drastically reduced its dependence on basic food imports. Each ton of wheat harvested means less foreign currency, sent abroad less vulnerability to global fluctuations, and more power over its own destiny. The Ministry of Agriculture's forecasts are optimistic. By 2026, about 40% of the national food budget will stay within the country. This means more schools, more roads, more jobs, and above all, more dignity. In the agricultural regions, the change is palpable. Fields that were previously abandoned have been reclaimed. Young people who once dreamed of migrating to Europe are now finding opportunities at home. Rural cooperatives are multiplying, and small industries are emerging around the agricultural centers, creating a network of prosperity that once seemed impossible. Women lead grain processing groups, turning millet into flour cookies and traditional drinks. What was a subsistence economy is now an economy of value. But the impact goes beyond the economy; it touches national pride. The new agricultural policies have become a symbol of sovereignty. In the squares and the schools, on the radio, people talk about food autonomy with the same respect as they talk about freedom. Farmers no longer see themselves as invisible workers. They see themselves as guardians of national sovereignty. And every seed planted is also a silent vote of confidence in an African future built by Africans. This wheat and millet revolution has not gone unnoticed. Neighboring countries, Mali, Niger, Togo, and even Senegal, have sent delegations to study the Burkina Faso model. Some call it the Sahel effect, the inspiration of seeing a country poor in natural resources, but rich in courage, creating its own path to independence. Others see something even bigger, a new chapter in African history, where the people no longer wait for external aid, but build their own salvation. Behind the scenes, local universities have become laboratories of the future. Researchers develop agricultural drones to monitor soil moisture, while technicians perfect low-cost solar irrigation systems. What was once imported is now created by young, creative, determined Burkina Faso engineers. Science, industry, and the field are walking together for the first time in decades. And there's a quiet beauty in all of this. Burkina Faso, the country that for years was synonymous with drought, hunger, and dependence, is becoming an example of resilience and innovation. The arid land is now blooming with ideas. And every spike of wheat, every handful of millet, is a declaration to the world. Africa's true wealth is not in the gold underground, but in the gold that is born from the earth. The sun rises slowly over the Sahel fields, painting the horizon orange and gold. Between the rows of wheat and millet, the wind blows lightly, swaying the spikes as if they were silent prayers. Children run barefoot among the crops, laughing, unaware that they are treading on the future of a nation. It is here, on this reddish, stubborn ground, that Burkina Faso has planted more than seeds; it has planted a destiny. What began as a survival project has turned into a symbol of rebirth. The hands that once begged for aid are now shaping their own path. Farmers have become engineers of the soil, women managers of the harvest, young people protectors of hope. Every grain of millet, every spike of wheat is living proof that true independence is not won with weapons, it is won with food. Because a people who can feed themselves can also free themselves. Today, the Sahel is flourishing where there was once only dust. Solar pumps spin like metallic hearts, pulsing life into the plantations. The wells are giving water again. The silos, once empty, are now full. And in the villages there is a new kind of wealth, not of gold or oil, but of plenty of dignity, of peace. Burkina Faso's agricultural revolution is not made of speeches, but of actions: the hoe that cuts the soil, the hand that sews the oven, that bakes the bread. The world watches with astonishment. How could such a small, landlocked country without abundant mineral resources do what entire powers couldn't? The answer lies in the spirit of a people who believe in what they plant. Burkina Faso understood a simple and profound truth. The future is not waited for, it is cultivated. And every new seed cast into the earth is an act of faith, faith in work, faith in science, faith in their own African destiny. As the sun sets, the fields continue to shine. From a distance, they look like rivers of gold, undulating in the afternoon breeze. But it's not gold, it's wheat, it's millet, it's life. And the sound heard in the distance is not the wind, it is the murmur of a continent waking up. A continent that is finally beginning to harvest what it planted. The gold of Africa is not beneath the earth, it is in what it brings forth. And so, Burkina Faso closes another chapter in its history, a chapter that began with hunger and ended with bread.